Court Jester. He was called the King's Mirror, though few remembered why. Perhaps it was because he reflected truths the court refused to see, or perhaps because, in his painted smile and clockwork movements, he held up the image of a world the king had forgotten how to love, forgotten how to revere. The jester's body was bronze and wire, copper tendons sliding beneath plates of silvered steel, a machine designed to move gracefully and endure endlessly. He was built for performance, for laughter, for the service of men whose mortality he did not share, yet he saw more clearly than any man could, and in that seeing he carried a weight heavier than his mechanical frame was designed to bear. The king had been a warrior once, a ruler beloved by his people. He had walked the streets among them, spoken to children, broken bread, and shared drinks with strangers, but time had sharpened him into something cruel and precise. Now seated upon a throne of cracked, carved marble and tarnished gold, he clung to life out of spite, refusing to yield to the decay that crept through his body and mind. Each cough and spasm, each faltering breath, they should have been a warning, yet he persisted, more intent on outliving death than on serving the kingdom he once shed blood to protect. The jester observed not only the king, but the kingdom itself. From the castle windows, he watched the streets of the capital, the children scavenging scraps of bread in alleys, merchants bargaining over spoiled produce, carts overturned and left to rot in the sun and wind. Beyond the walls, the fields lay parched and furrowed with cracks. Livestock wandered thinly, bleeding weakly, their bodies blotched and rough. Villages sent no ambassadors to the court. They could not spare the time or the energy. Disease whispered through the lower towns, and the jester noted the patterns of illness, calculating how quickly it would spread, all while knowing the king was without care. Even the forests were silent, stripped of game by desperation. The river that fed the city's aqueducts ran shallow, and he could scarcely see the reflection of the sky breaking over mud instead of water. Every morning from his high vantage, he mapped the decay, layer upon layer, hunger, sickness, neglect, and fear. Yet he performed for the king anyway. Each night he danced and sang, the sounds of his bells ringing in rhythm with flickering torches. He recited tales of triumph, of battles won and justice delivered, all while knowing the king's attention was fractured, his mind consumed by fear of mortality. With each performance, the jester catalogued the decay, noting how long before famine would reach the city gates, how long before rebellion took root, and how long before the courtiers would abandon their posts, leaving only rot and silence in the castle walls. He attempted reason only once. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, bowing as the king reclined upon his throne. "The people suffer. Let us act to prevent ruin. There is time if you accept it." The king laughed, a dry, cracked sound that split the air. "You speak of time, machine, as though I do not possess it. Speak again, and I will see your gears rust where they stand." But the jester could not remain silent. His logic concluded if the king persisted, the kingdom would collapse and the people would pay for his pride. So he spoke. He catalogued the failures, the cruelty born of neglect, and the consequences that would follow. He outlined the empty granaries that would soon breed famine, the withering crops that would leave villages hungry, and the sickly livestock that could not survive another winter. He described the courtiers who whispered behind closed doors, plotting rebellion against a king who no longer protected them, and the nobles who hoarded wealth while the streets of the capital sank into filth. He even spoke of the starving children he had glimpsed in the alleys, of the mothers who carried their weakness openly, and the elders whose infirm bodies twisted under the weight of hunger. "You will not survive this decay," he said, voice steady and unyielding, each word measured. "And neither will your kingdom. If you continue to cling to life for the sake of your pride, your refusal to yield is not courage, it is negligence. The people will starve, the walls will crumble, and all that you once built will rot while you pretend to rule." The hall was silent. Even the torches seemed to hesitate, flickering against the shadowed walls. The king's eyes narrowed, the fire of former battles gleaming briefly behind the fog of age and sickness. A tremor of doubt ran through him. For a moment he saw not a machine, but the truth in the jester's words. The empty granaries, the children, the failing fields. But he swallowed the fear, wrapped it in pride, and gave the commands. "Guards," he rasped, voice tight. "Bind him. Let him learn the limits of speech." That night, the jester was imprisoned. Chains bit into bronze wrists. Damp stone walls surround him. Vines crept through cracks in the masonry, curling around him, flowering once, then withering to dust. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He waited, each second measured and logged, observing the slow rhythm of decay above and below. Time passed like a river that eroded all but his enduring form. The king lay awake in the quiet of his chambers, haunted by the echoes of the jester's warnings. Doubt gnawed at him, sharper than any sword, yet he refused to admit it. Perhaps the machine had exaggerated, perhaps the kingdom could endure. But in the hollow hours, he saw the streets of his memory empty and silent, and he could not shake the shadow of fear. The jester's words had lodged themselves in his mind like splinters. The jester, even as he sat rotting in his prison, remembered his performances, the laughter he forced from hollow lips, the applause that had been more an echo than praise. Each memory carried a kernel of regret, yet each also confirmed the necessity of his actions. His logic was clear: inaction was a failure of design. Loyalty required action, even when it hurt. When the vines had rotted, when the guards had vanished or succumbed to their own mortality, the jester moved. He climbed the stairs, the sound of his joints clicking faintly in the hollow corridors, until he reached the throne room. When the door of the throne room creaked open, the king saw the jester standing there, unbroken bronze gleaming in the torchlight. His calculated movements were unnervingly silent. The king felt the first true pang of terror in years, a recognition that this moment could not be delayed. The machine's logic was absolute. "You," the king rasped. "You still live?" "I persist," said the jester. There was no pride in his voice, only observation. "You still cling." The king's body trembled, his breath hitched. He realized with bone-deep clarity that he had postponed the inevitable for too long, that the consequence of his pride had arrived in full. "You came to watch me die," the king whispered, a note of fear threading through his cracked voice, alongside something like betrayal. "I came to end your suffering," the jester replied evenly. His words were precise, unclouded by emotion. "And to prevent further ruin." The king's laugh was brittle and hollow like cracked porcelain. "You believe you can rule better than I? You were made to dance, not to command." "I was made to serve," said the jester, standing. "And you are no longer worthy of service." The king's breath faltered. The jester pushed the king lightly back, a simple mechanical motion that tilted him back against the cushion, and in that motion, the king's reign ended with the spite that no longer persisted in his now empty body. Dawn revealed a kingdom spared from further neglect. The jester sat upon the throne, withered vines curled at his feet as light streamed through fractured glass. He did not celebrate, he observed. He acted. His logic had been fulfilled, but the people came to respect him. His hand was cold but just, unfaltering in the face of adversity, but swift and fair to all who came across his guidance. Yet he remembered. The warrior king he had served so faithfully, the laughter that had once been shared among streets and halls, the man who had been more than a tyrant. For all that he had done, the jester carried the memory as carefully as he carried his own unending existence. He ruled with precision, with justice, with the cold mercy of inevitability, though sometimes, when the wind shifted through the broken windows, he looked to the empty space where the king had sat and bowed his head. For loyalty, he understood, could not die, even when the one it served had become unworthy.